So we're going to move on now to a different topic again, and this is the first of our topics that actually looks more at the student perspective. So we know that students are increasingly concerned about climate change and demanding climate action, and we know that this is a difficult topic that can engender anxiety in students. So our next piece is going to look at their research into student climate anxiety and what might be done about it.
Greetings from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. My name is Dr. Ann Campbell, and I'm an assistant professor, and I'm here with Thi Nguyen, a master's candidate. We are pleased to share this presentation as part of the International Education Climate Action Summit. The title of our presentation is Climate Anxiety and International Student Mobility, Overcoming Eco-Paralysis. We will begin by sharing our main takeaway messages with you. After that, we will define key terms and explain our interest and position in the topic. Then we will discuss the three main takeaway messages again in greater detail towards the goal of moving beyond climate anxiety and eco-paralysis and towards climate action in international education. So right at the beginning, here are our three take-home messages for administrators and faculty, which we will return to and explain in depth later. First, we recommend that practitioners and faculty acknowledge the concerns of young people in terms of climate anxiety and eco-paralysis. Second, we advocate for practitioners and faculty to recognize and address the links between social justice and the unequal impact of global warming. And third, we encourage administrators and faculty to advocate for climate action, both during and after the Education Abroad program, as a way to address climate anxiety and to help the planet.
Thank you, Anne, for the introduction. So there are two key terms that are important to this presentation. They are climate anxiety and eco-paralysis. Climate anxiety is the chronic emotional distress induced by climate change-related events. It stems from a growing awareness of the direct and indirect environmental impact on individuals' lives. Eco-paralysis is a state of feeling overwhelmed by climate change and not knowing what to do about it. In the context of this presentation, we will combine climate anxiety and eco-paralysis as one single phenomenon. This phenomenon refers to the immobility of students' minds in the face of climate change, despite the physical mobility. What usually happens is, in deciding whether or not to pursue opportunities abroad, students would almost always feel conflicted, knowing that their educational travels contribute to polluting the planet. Due to their under-addressed concerns, many students choose skepticism or ignorance as a coping strategies, which is counterproductive to both student learning and environmental sustainability. So before diving deeper into our study and recommendations, Anne and I would like to make clear our positionality on this particular topic. We both come from a graduate institution in California that deeply values international exchange and cross-cultural learning. As international education specialists, we believe that global solidarity is needed now more than ever to prepare the next generations to tackle global challenges, such as climate change. Our values also stem from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 4 and 13. These two goals, when placed side by side, demonstrate the purpose of education as supportive of both student mobility and a sustainable future, which show us that going global and going green should not be viewed as two contrasting narratives. To us, there are new frontiers regarding the role of international education that have yet to be thoroughly discussed. Therefore, we are eager to exchange ideas and learn from other people at the conference.
So from our observations in the field and our work with students, we see signs of anxiety and eco-paralysis among our students and colleagues. And from our perception, it seems even more pronounced in the younger generation. And while we don't have all the answers, we do think that things can be learned from the research and program design that has come before us, and from conversations like the ones happening during this conference. We have some initial ideas to put forward today as considerations to live with climate anxiety and to move beyond eco-paralysis towards action for the planet. Our first recommendation for administrators and faculty is to acknowledge that their students may be experiencing climate anxiety and that they and their students and colleagues may have eco-paralysis. This means addressing these concerns in classes and through program design and across disciplines. The academic literature seems to support the idea of eco-paralysis and climate anxiety among students today. Kelly found that those who take environmental studies courses, especially for the first time, find the lessons to be crushing. Yet Kelly noted that few classes in the study help students handle the emotional stress of climate change or allow them to, quote, feel empowered and ready to take action after class, unquote. Moreover, Robinson found that while faculty are aware of the importance of addressing climate change topics in their curricula across disciplines, that university educators were unprepared to be involved in extensive interdisciplinary teaching and preferred to teach within the safety of their own subject boundaries. Verily provides one idea here as a way forward, arguing that faculty should guide students towards a, quote, live with climate change, unquote, approach to channel the feelings of guilt, frustration, and grief towards fixing the flaws and injustices in the existing systems. Based on these points and other findings, we recommend that faculty and administrators acknowledge and incorporate issues related to climate change and climate anxiety into education abroad programs, including helping students to live with their climate anxiety.
We also believe that there's a need to address a link between the environment and social justice, as this approach can help bring different students' communities together and motivate them to commit to climate action. From our observations, many students are indeed tirelessly trying to identify a course of action to tackle climate issues in their own education. In 2016, when Fisher conducted interviews with youth climate activists, he found that positioning climate change as strictly an environmental issues, such as flying less and saving the polar bears, greatly undermined the wide range of life experiences and perspectives that had shaped this field. In 2014, El Zabi and El Ansari found that students in the Netherlands were highly concerned about global warming, but their worries were linked more directly to the inequitable impact of global warming. And they understood that combating climate change was also about fighting for the rights of underprivileged groups. From these findings, we believe that eco-paralysis and climate anxiety can be enhanced when students are aware of the environmental toll of climate change, but are unable to connect this aspect to their own individuals' lives. This can be a very isolating experience. To support students, international education programs should incorporate curricular lessons and approaches on our global interconnectedness and environmental justice. In this way, students can envision using their own education as a way to not only give back to environmental causes, but also contribute to the socio-economic well-being of the larger society. In doing this, we can further bridge the perceived gap between student mobility and sustainability.
Our third recommendation is to advocate for climate action both during and after the Education Abroad program. So for example, Dvorak and colleagues argued that faculty members leading study abroad programs should be responsible for framing productive discussions with students and other institutional stakeholders and partners surrounding sustainable choices in study abroad. Buckley and colleagues argued that education abroad taught, quote, critical sustainability principles that would be difficult to replicate if students did not leave their home university, unquote. However, while education abroad might be transformative, the ways that students can implement these new lessons at home were not addressed. Paradoxically, if students return home to face structural or cultural barriers to implementing these new sustainability lessons, this could potentially lead to increased feelings of disempowerment and anxiety. In our review of programs, we found many great examples of campuses who were incorporating sustainability lessons into their curricula and on their campuses, providing opportunities for students returning from study abroad and for international students to be involved in these initiatives. We have mentioned a few here on this slide, including from the University of Melbourne and Lehigh University and Dickinson University. Later in the presentation, we'll provide a link if you want to learn more information about these initiatives.
So as you see, overcoming eco-paralysis in the space of international education requires strong collaboration among students, administrators, professors, and institutions. It takes a great deal of courage from all parties to think and act differently to improve life in different corners of the world and advance together toward a more just and sustainable society. This brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you all so much for joining us. Our contact information is on the screen.
As a final point, we wanted to share this bit.ly link. It's an open link of some of our resources and programs that we've been looking at to help shape our upcoming research project. We hope that these might also be helpful to you in your own work. Indeed, the work of helping to preserve the planet and reverse the effect of global warming belongs to all of us.
Thank you very much indeed to Thi and Anne for sharing with us the results of their work around climate anxiety and eco-paralysis. I love the messaging that's coming through strongly, both in that last presentation, but also through some of the other examples we've heard today about being upfront and acknowledging with students that this is a problem. There is a reason people can be anxious and should be anxious, but that if you give people practical steps and opportunities to take action themselves, then that can reduce the anxiety. And it can even be incorporated into study abroad programming, both before and after. And so essentially it's using the climate crisis as a kind of teachable moment to help reinforce some of the action that needs to be taken.